In this video, I'll demonstrate how to groom a Cavoodle, or any kind of Oodle, or any dog that needs a full clip from start to finish. Okay, so Soda has had a pre-clip, a bath, and I've blow dried her fur. I like to start the groom by clipping a dog's back first, so with my slicker brush, I'm just brushing the fur up against the grain. Today I'll be using my Harniger clippers with a 10 blade, and I'll pop on a snap-on comb. I've decided to clip her fur using a 4 comb, which clips to the length of 13mm or half an inch. I'll link above to a video I've created that outlines the different snap-on comb lengths, which will help you choose the length you'd like to clip your dog's fur. Starting at the neck, glide your clippers down your dog's back, following the curves of your dog's body, all the way from the neck to just above their tail. You can do this either with your dog sitting or standing. I prefer them sitting because I feel like their skin is more stretched, which means you'll get more of an even trim, and it also gives them a bit of a rest before you move on to other areas of their body where you'll tend to want them to stand. But it's personal preference, so do whatever works best for you and your dog. Now in grooming, what you do once you do twice, so I'll brush up the fur again using my slicker brush and glide the clippers back down Soda's back. You go over the same section 2 to 3 times, or until you notice the clippers aren't trimming any more fur. This means the coat has been trimmed at an even length. Now that her back is finished, I'll need to stand her up so I can trim her sides. You might need a belly sling to prevent your dog from sitting. I'll use one later on in this video, or you can try supporting their belly just with your hand. I brush up the fur on the back of her leg, belly and side, and then I get my honeycomb clippers and glide them down her side. Down her side and then over the top of her back leg. Next, I glide the clippers down her rib cage and scoop the fur against my other hand at the bottom of the rib cage. Be very careful of the loose skin just right here. You can easily cut it with the clippers. So hold your fingers behind the skin in your opposite hand and then carefully glide the clippers over the top of the skin while scooping out that fur. So let's do this again. Brush up the fur and glide the clippers over the same section. And once you finish this side of your dog, repeat the same process on the other side of your dog. Grooming the belly can be a little bit awkward because it can be hard to reach with the clippers, especially if your dog has short legs. The easiest way to groom the belly is if someone else can hold up your dog's front legs. However, if you're on your own or your dog is quite old or injured, the easiest way to reach the belly is by holding up their front leg like this. This will give you room to get your clippers in underneath. What I'm doing here is running the clippers from Soda's chest all the way to her groin, and then removing any fur that's behind her arm. Next, I like to finish grooming the back leg. I brush the fur up with my slicker brush, all the way up her leg, and then I'll get my clippers and glide them down the side of her leg. To reach the fur on her inner leg near the loose skin, I use my opposite hand to twist the skin around, and then I lift her leg so I can run the clippers all the way down to her toes. I run them down the front of her leg and also the side of her leg. I'll take a couple more sweeps and then I'll brush the fur up again and repeat the process. To trim the fur on the inside of the leg, the trick is to lift up the opposite leg so they can't kick up the leg that you're grooming. Lifting the leg also gives you room to get your slicker brush in there so you can brush up the fur, and then to get your clippers in there so you can trim the fur. Notice I've lifted her leg along with her tail. That's so I don't accidentally trim any fur from her tail. Now I'll finish trimming the back of Soda's legs. First, I'll brush up her fur with my slicker brush. Now you never run your clippers straight down the back of your dog's legs because your dog could easily kick up their leg, and if you're not using a snap-on cone on your clipper blade, you could accidentally cut their tendon. So instead you run the clippers around the top of the back towards their bum. Soda is going to try and sit down when I touch her bum, so I'll have to use a belly strap. I attach this to the top of my grooming table, and then I pass the strap under her belly and secure it. I'll make sure it's not done up too tight, and then I'll make sure that all 4 paws are still flat on the table and not lifted in the air. Now I'll lift up her tail and I'll give it a good brush up. And then using my clippers, I will glide them down her bum. You can tell she really doesn't like it, so I'll try and distract her, and while I'm here, I'll finish grooming the top of her left leg. I'll link to a more detailed video above on how to groom your dog's bum. Now I'll finish grooming Soda's back left leg. I've kept the belly strap on to keep her standing. So I've brushed up the fur, and now I'll glide the clippers down her leg, just like what we did on her right leg. And just like what we did on the other side, I'm going to lift her back left leg so I can brush up the fur on her inner right leg, and then I'll get the clippers in there so I can give it a trim. And while I'm here, I'm going to give her private parts a bit of a trim as well. Now I'll shave Soda's groin. Soda is a female, so I'll concentrate on shaving her private part at the back here. I've removed the snap-on comb from my clippers, so I'm just using my 10 blade. I've very gently lifted her leg and I'm just shaving one side. And now I'll move to the other side, gently lift her leg and shave this side. I'll also shave the rest of her groin area. On this angle it's a little bit hard to see, so I'll link to a more detailed video above on how to shave the groin area, where I demonstrate both on a male and female dog. But essentially you'll see I've shaved Soda from where you'd think should have a belly button all the way down to her private parts. I've used my clippers to do this, as well as my mini trimmers to get into those hard to reach places. Now it's time to use my straight scissors to trim any fur that I've missed on Soda's back legs whilst using the clippers. I brush the fur up on the inside of Soda's leg, as well as the back of her leg, and then I'll trim any fur that's sticking out. If you're unsure at any time where your dog's skin is, use your fingers to check before using the scissors. I angle my scissors downwards away from the body so I can make sure I don't accidentally cut Soda if she suddenly moves. I'll do this again, so I'll brush up the fur with my slicker brush, and then I'll trim the fur on the inside of her leg. There is a bit of fur sticking out that I can't reach with my scissors facing downwards, so I'll angle them away from her body. Next I lift her leg and brush the fur up on her lower leg, and then still using my straight scissors, I'll trim the fur around her leg. Now I'll move on to grooming her paw. So first I'll use my curved scissors to trim around the paw. I'll trim around the side, the back, the other side, and also the front of the paw. Next, I get my mini trimmers and I run them across the top of the paw pads just to trim any fur that's sticking out. Then I scoop the fur out of the two big gaps between the large paw pad and the smaller paw pads. I'll link to a more in-depth video above on how to remove the fur between your dog's paws using either mini trimmers or scissors. Now it's time to trim the fur on the top of Soda's paw, so I lift up her foot at the hock and then brush the fur up with my slicker brush against the grain. Then, still using my curved scissors, I trim across the top of the paw in a curved motion, trimming any fur that's sticking out. I'll also trim the fur just around the outside of her paw. What you do once you do twice, so I'll brush up the fur again with my slicker brush and I'll go over with my curved scissors and trim any long fur that's sticking out, making sure I blend the length of the fur on her paw with the length of the fur on her leg. Now it's time to groom Soda's front legs. Soda doesn't usually like me using clippers on her front legs. I usually just use my scissors, but I'll try and demonstrate how to do it with clippers today. So I've brushed up the fur on all sides of her leg, and now I'll get my clippers that has the 4 combs still on it, and I'll start grooming down from her shoulder and down her leg. Essentially what you want to do is run the clippers down the back of the leg, the front of the leg, and then both sides of the leg. I've just seen some fur behind her arm and down her rib cage that seems a little bit long, so I'll just run my clippers down it while I'm here. Just to reach the inside of her leg, I pull her leg out slightly and then I can get my clippers in there and I can run them through her armpit and down the inside of her leg. While I've got her leg up, I'll run my clippers down the inside of her opposite leg, just like we did to the back legs. I'll keep going over the inside of her leg, the outside, the back and the front of her leg until I can see no more fur is getting clipped by the clippers. Now you'd brush the fur up again on her leg and run the clippers down all sides of her leg. However, I won't do that because Soda's not enjoying it, so instead I'll finish grooming her leg with my straight scissors. Be very careful using your scissors down the back of the leg because there is that paw pad just above their foot. If you can't see it, just use your fingers to feel for it so you don't accidentally cut it. Now I haven't shown it here, but what you'll do once you finish trimming the back of the leg, you'll trim the front and both the sides. Next we'll shave the front paw. We'll do this exactly the same way we did the back paw. So I've lifted up her paw and now using my mini trimmers, I'm just shaving across the top of the paw pads. I'm also going to scoop out that fur between the big paw pad and the smaller paw pads. And I'll just shave down the bottom towards her nails as well. I'll link to a more in-depth video above on how to remove the fur between your dog's paws, either using these mini trimmers or just with scissors. You'll see there's still a little bit of fur below the nails, but that's alright. When you get to the next stage of trimming the top of the paws, when you brush that fur up with your slicker brush against the grain, that will pick up the fur that's currently between her toes, and then you'll trim it with your scissors. I'll demonstrate how to groom the front paw. It is exactly the same as the back paw, but I'll show you again. First I start with brushing the fur up against the grain with my slicker brush. Then I'll get my curved scissors and I'll start trimming the fur across the paw in a circular motion. The armpit fur can get very matted from the friction from walking or rubbing on a harness. You really need to shave this fur, however on a small dog like Soda, the blade on your clippers is generally too wide and awkward to get into such a small space. So I use these Sheer Magic mini trimmers, which have a blade width of 3 centimeters, which makes them the perfect size to fit into small spaces like armpits. All you need to do is lift up your dog's arm and scoop out any mats and knots and trim any long fur. Use your fingers to feel for any leftover knots or mats and then shave them. Now it's time to groom the neck. First I lift up Soda's chin and brush the fur down, and then I brush it back up, making sure any knots and tangles are brushed out. It's important to keep your dog's chin lifted so any skin folds on the neck are stretched because they can easily get caught in the clippers. I start at the base of her neck and slowly work my way around her head, blending the clip into the rest of her groomed body. Now it's time to groom Soda's face. First, I gently brush the outside of her ears, followed by the inside. Just be careful because the wires of the brush can scratch your dog's skin, so when you're doing the inside of the ears, just brush the ends where the fur is. To hold Soda still, I'm just holding the fur under her chin. I'll link to a video here demonstrating 3 different holds you can try to keep your dog still while grooming their face. I've just brushed through her muzzle on both sides of her face, then her other ear. I've brushed the outside and now just brush through the inside of the ear. If you find any knots or mats, keep brushing or use a dematting tool. I'll list the product I use in the video description below. And lastly, I finished by brushing the top of her head. I've groomed the rest of Soda's body using a number 4 comb, which trims to the length of 13 millimeters or half an inch. I'm going to trim her head the same length. If you're after a cute teddy bear look, I suggest using a comb that's 2 lengths longer on the head than the body. For example, when I groom dogs short for summer, I typically use a number 2 comb on their body, which trims to the length of 6 millimeters or 1/4 of an inch. I'm holding Soda around her muzzle to keep her still. I've brushed the fur over her eyes and I've carefully placed the clippers just above her eyes and I'm gliding them over the top of the head to the base of her neck. Once I've trimmed the top of her head, I'll flip over one of her ears and run the clippers down the side of her face, just 1 clipper width wide, making sure I don't trim any of her ear fur. Once I finish this, I'll repeat the same thing on the other side of her face. In grooming, what you do once, you do twice. So I brush the fur on Soda's head over her eyes again, and then I glide over her head with the clippers to trim any fur I've missed the first time. Now I'll trim the fur between Soda's eyes. Next, I like to flip over the dog's ear to get it out of the way so I don't accidentally trim any fur from their ear. Next, pick up your comb and gently comb your dog's fringe away from their eyes and comb through their muzzle to double check for any knots or tangles. Now using the comb, lift up the fur that sticks out from the corner of the eye by combing the fur towards you and then away from you towards the eye. Now that the fur has been lifted, open up your straight scissors and place them on the fur you've lifted up, resting them on your dog and pointing the end of the scissors towards the stop, which is the area between their eyes, and very gently cut. Now with grooming, what you do once you always do twice to ensure you don't miss any fur. So lift the fur up again using your comb. Comb away from the eye, comb towards the eye and cut. Now repeat the same thing on the other side of the face. You'll notice I'm using a couple of holds to keep Soda's face still. I'm alternating between holding her by the fur underneath her chin, so her beard fur essentially, and wrapping my forefinger and thumb lightly around her muzzle. Give both holds a go and see which is more comfortable for you and your dog. Trimming your dog's face can be a bit tricky, especially if they're not used to it, so I recommend grooming them straight after a long walk so they're a little bit tired, and if possible, ask someone to help hold them for you and feed them treats as you go. For Soda's fringe, I use my fine-tooth comb to comb the fur on top of her head over her eyes. When trimming the fringe, you trim from the outer corner of one eye, around the head to the outer corner of the other eye, in a curve shaped like a visor. I get my curved scissors and move Soda's ear out of the way so I don't accidentally cut any of her ear fur. I start trimming at the corner of her eye very carefully, ensuring I also trim her eyelashes along with her fur. I move her head around using my muzzle grip as I trim, making sure I keep the ends of the scissors away from her eyes. In grooming, what you do once you do twice, so I'll do this again. I'll comb down her fur and trim any fur that I've missed. As you can see, I've missed some of her right eyelashes, so I'll trim again from the corner of her left eye to the corner of her right eye, making sure I trim those eyelashes. Here you go, I'll just trim the eyelashes now. Now if your dog has any fur sticking up on their nose, obstructing their view, just get your comb and comb it gently, then place your scissors down the middle of their nose and trim gently. If you can still see goop in the corner of your dog's eyes, cut the fur underneath the goop to remove it. You'll notice in this video the scissors I'm using have a pointed tip. I'm not using scissors with a rounded tip because I've sent my pair off to be sharpened. However, I highly recommend using rounded tip for beginners because they're a lot safer. Okay, now you're nearly finished. Just trim any remaining fur that's sticking out around the corner of the eyes, along the nose, or in between the eyes. Then check to make sure the fur looks even on both sides, and then you're done. To groom Soda's muzzle, I grab my slicker brush and flip her ear back to get it out of the way. I brush through her muzzle fur, checking for any knots or mats, and then I brush it in the opposite direction to lift the fur away from her neck. Using my curved scissors, I trim the fur from the bottom of her mouth to the bottom of her ear in a curved line. What you do once you do twice, so I'll brush the fur again to find any hair that I've missed. And then I'll trim any fur that's poking out along that curved line again. If you're not sure how close you are to the skin, use your fingers to feel for the skin to avoid cutting too close. And you'll see I've trimmed this quite rough. That's because I'm going to go over it again with the thinning shears. I'll repeat the same process on the other side. Since I'm right-handed, I find trimming the right side a bit more difficult than the left. I find it easier to trim this side in the opposite direction, going from the corner of the ear to the corner of the mouth. I'll flip over Soda's ear to get it out of the way and brush through her muzzle. If you feel any knots, use your dematting tool to get the knots out. Then I trim in a curved line from the corner of her ear to the corner of her mouth. I'll brush the muzzle again and trim any fur that's poking out that I've missed. Now it's time to trim Soda's beard. So holding the top of Soda's muzzle, I'll brush the fur down both sides of her face. Then using my curved scissors, I'll trim the fur underneath her beard so it's even on both sides. Lifting up her head to stretch her neck, I then trim any fur that I've missed. I'll then repeat the process again, so I'll brush down the fur on both sides of her face, and then with my curved scissors, I'll trim any fur that's poking out. Now it's time to use my thinning shears along the curve of Soda's muzzle to blend and soften any of the blunt trimming lines. Soda also has really thick curly fur, which can make her muzzle look quite bulky, so the thinning shears will help to thin out that fur. I first brush through her muzzle and then I trim the fur that's sticking out. This side looks good to me, so I'll turn her head round and I'll do the same thing on the other side of her muzzle. Lastly, I'll groom Soda's ears. I've already trimmed the left ear, so I'll show you how to groom her right ear. I give it a quick brush and then I flip it over. Cavoodles and many breeds with long ears are prone to getting ear infections, so trimming the fur under the ear opening can help with airflow and prevent moisture buildup. I use my straight scissors for this, but be very careful as the sound so close to the ears can make your dog react like Soda has and shake their head. I'll give her ear a quick brush again. And then on the inside of the ear, you can feel where the ear leather ends. So when you're trimming the ears, always use your finger to feel where the leather ends so you don't accidentally cut it. Using my curved scissors, I hold the end of Soda's ear leather with my thumb and trim the fur underneath my fingers in a curved line. If you prefer a straight look, you can just use your straight scissors and trim straight across the end of the ears. I'll do this again, so I'll brush Soda's ear with this slicker brush, and then with my curved scissors, I'll trim any fur that's poking out so the ear is even. And that's it, Soda's groom is finished. I've just realised I didn't trim her tail because I cut it quite short last time. However, I'll link to a video above that I made on how to trim your dog's tail into a flag shape. As you can see from the before photo, Soda now looks really fresh, she looks a lot neater, and now you can see her beautiful eyes. Thanks for watching.